camping, the perfect way to reconnect with nature and occasionally vanish without a trace. Today, we're diving into 5 eerie cases of campers who set off into the wild and never came back. Was it foul play, a wrong turn, or did Bigfoot finally get tired of the paparazzi? Grab your marshmallows. This one's a mystery. It was December 21st, 2013, a cold, crisp winter morning, the kind of day where frost lingers on the grass and the air is sharp with the promise of snow. Simon Hodgson, a 48-year-old man from Rickall, North Yorkshire, pulled on his coat, grabbed his binoculars, and prepared for what should have been an ordinary day. A devoted birdwatcher, Simon had spent years exploring the Yorkshire coast, drawn to its rugged beauty and the thrill of spotting rare avian life. Today, his destination was Bempton Cliffs, a nature reserve near Bridlington that had become his sanctuary over the years. As he drove his camper van toward the reserve, the excitement built within him. The familiar journey brought a sense of comfort, each turn of the road a well-worn path in his routine. When he finally arrived, he parked in his usual spot, overlooking the vast expanse of the sea. The cliffs stood tall and unyielding, their rocky faces adorned with nesting seabirds. The calls of kittiwakes and the distant cry of gulls filled the air, a symphony of the wild that Simon cherished. Stepping out into the brisk air, he inhaled deeply, feeling at peace. The world felt quiet, except for the sounds of nature. He slung his binoculars around his neck and set off along the cliffside paths, eager to lose himself in the tranquility of birdwatching. Hours passed as he observed the graceful flight of birds against the endless sky, jotting down notes in his worn field guide. It was moments like these that made him feel most alive. But as the afternoon waned, Simon knew it was time to head home. He retraced his steps toward his camper van, his heart full, his body pleasantly exhausted. He had seen everything he had hoped to, maybe even more. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting golden hues across the cliffs, and the wind whispered through the sparse grass as if bidding him farewell. Then, Simon vanished. That evening, when his family didn't hear from him, they grew concerned. It was unlike him to go silent, especially after a day spent doing what he loved. They called his phone, no answer. As hours passed, their worry turned into dread. By morning, their worst fears seemed to take shape. Simon's camper van was still in the same spot at the reserve, discovered by an RSPB staff member. The vehicle was untouched. Inside, his birdwatching books and binoculars lay neatly as if waiting for his return. But Simon was nowhere to be found. His family, friends, and local authorities launched an immediate search. Teams combed the cliffs, calling his name, scanning every crevice and path he might have wandered onto. Drones and rescue teams scoured the area, but there was no trace of him, no footprints leading away, no discarded belongings, no clues to follow. It was as if he had simply disappeared into thin air. Theories quickly emerged. Some believed Simon had fallen from the cliffs, his body carried away by the relentless tide. Others suggested he might have chosen to vanish intentionally, seeking solitude and escape from life's pressures. But those who knew him best struggled to believe he would walk away from the life he loved so dearly. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then years. With no new leads, no sightings, and no remains ever discovered, Simon's case faded into an eerie mystery, leaving his family in agonizing limbo. The absence of answers was a wound that never quite healed. As each December 21st came and went, his loved ones gathered at Bempton Cliffs, standing on the same windswept paths where Simon was last seen. They held vigils, whispered prayers into the salty air, and vowed never to stop searching for the truth. But as they gazed out over the cliffs, an unsettling thought lingered. What if Simon was still out there somewhere, waiting to be found? What if the answers were just beyond their reach, hidden in the depths of the unknown? And what if they would never know what truly happened to the man who vanished without a trace? 12-year-old Garrett Bardsley was an adventurous boy from Summit County, Utah. With his light brown hair, hazel eyes, and a bright smile, he loved the outdoors. As a dedicated Boy Scout, he spent countless weekends hiking and camping in Utah's wilderness. On August 20th, 2004, Garrett joined his father, Kevin, and fellow scouts for a trip to Kuberant Lake in the Uinta Mountains. The area, surrounded by tall trees and clear water, was the perfect spot for an adventure. Garrett was especially excited to fish with his dad, something they both loved. As they stood by the lake, casting their lines, Garrett's clothes became soaked. He laughed it off at first, but soon, the wet fabric grew uncomfortable. Deciding to change, he told his dad he was heading back to camp, a short walk away. Kevin watched as his son walked off, never imagining it would be the last time he saw him. When Kevin returned to camp, Garrett was nowhere to be found. He assumed his son had gotten distracted, but as the minutes passed with no sign of him, worry took hold. He called out, his voice echoing through the trees. Nothing. Kevin searched the area frantically, questioning the other scouts, but no one had seen him. Panic set in. Hoping Garrett had wandered back to the lake, Kevin retraced his steps, but there was no sign of him. The troop quickly launched a search, scouring the area, calling his name. As darkness fell, flashlights flickered through the trees, but still, Garrett was missing. By morning, search teams arrived. Volunteers, professional rescuers, trained dogs, and helicopters covered miles of rugged terrain. Days turned into weeks, yet no trace of Garrett was ever found. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Months passed, but his family refused to give up. They appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, their voices trembling as they pleaded for answers. They spoke of Garrett's love for adventure, his dreams of becoming a missionary, and the unimaginable pain of not knowing. Theories swirled. Some believed he was attacked by a wild animal. Others thought he drowned or got lost. Some even whispered he had been abducted. But without evidence, his disappearance remained a haunting mystery. Despite their grief, Kevin and Heidi turned their pain into purpose. They traveled to Ecuador to build a school in Garrett's memory, hoping to create something positive from their tragedy. They spoke at schools and events, urging people to stay vigilant and never stop searching. As years passed, Garrett's face faded from missing posters, but his family never lost hope. They held on to their memories, cherishing the laughter and love he brought into their lives. We can't help but wonder, what if? What if he had stayed by the lake? What if he had never walked back alone? What if his family never had to endure the agony of uncertainty? But for now, those questions remain unanswered. All they can do is hope that one day the truth will finally come to light. Nearly half a century ago, what was meant to be a peaceful family hike in northern Stevens County turned into a nightmare. Bobby Panknin, a young boy full of life and curiosity, vanished near Deep Lake Resort, leaving his family trapped in an endless cycle of grief and unanswered questions. It was a simple outing. Bobby, his brothers Jim and Bill, and their mother Edna set off down a rugged logging road. The sound of a nearby creek piqued Bill's curiosity, and Edna, ever the cautious mother, decided to accompany him. She told Jim to stay with Bobby on the road, a seemingly safe decision, but fate had other plans. For reasons unknown, Jim soon followed after them, leaving Bobby alone. It was only for a few minutes, but when Bill and Edna returned, expecting to find both boys waiting, there was only silence. Bobby was gone. At first, they thought he had simply wandered off, but as their calls went unanswered and the minutes stretched unbearably long, fear took hold. They searched desperately, combing the trees, scanning every inch of the road, but Bobby had vanished, as if the forest had swallowed him whole. As hours turned to days and days into weeks, no trace of him was found. The search expanded, drawing in law enforcement, volunteers, and search dogs. The lake was dredged. The woods were scoured. But despite their efforts, there were no footprints, no torn clothing, nothing. Bobby had simply disappeared. With no leads, theories swirled. Had he wandered too far and succumbed to the elements? Had he been attacked by a wild animal? Or, the most chilling possibility, had someone taken him? Bobby's father, Howard Panknin, was fishing with his eldest son, Ted, when he heard the news. He rushed back, desperate to find his missing child. But no matter how hard he searched, Bobby remained elusive. As the years passed, grief morphed into guilt. Edna, despite her deep love for her children, became an unfair target for blame. Whispers followed her. Why had she left Bobby alone? The burden of these accusations weighed heavily on her, adding to her heartbreak. Jim, too, carried the weight of regret. He often wondered if he should have stayed. Could he have prevented Bobby's disappearance? But deep down, he knew. None of them could have predicted what happened. It wasn't negligence, it wasn't recklessness, it was simply a cruel twist of fate. Bobby's eldest brother, Ted, often found himself lost in thought, wondering if Bobby was still out there somewhere. He entertained the possibility that his brother had been taken, raised by another family, living under a different name, unaware of the life stolen from him. It was an impossible thought, but one he clung to because the alternative was too devastating to accept. Though the Panknin family never stopped loving the outdoors, they never returned to Deep Lake. The place that once held laughter and togetherness now carried the weight of an unbearable loss. Still, Bobby's memory remained with them, woven into every story, every photograph, and every whispered wish for a different ending. To this day, Bobby's disappearance remains one of Washington's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. No body, no evidence, no closure. Just a young boy who stepped into the woods and was never seen again. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is a breathtaking place, but for one family, it became the setting of an unimaginable nightmare. Just 6 days shy of his 7th birthday, Dennis Lloyd Martin joined his family for a camping trip, an adventure meant to be filled with laughter and exploration. Instead, it became one of the most baffling missing person cases in history, one that remains unsolved more than 50 years later. Dennis, affectionately called Denny by his family, was small for his age but full of energy and resilience. On June 14, 1969, he hiked with his relatives from Russell Field to Spence Field, where they planned to meet up with more family. After lunch, the adults sat back to enjoy the view, while Dennis, his brother Doug, and 2 other boys ran off to play nearby. At some point, the boys huddled together, whispering their plan. The adults, watching from a distance, could tell what was coming: a prank. The boys would scatter and then jump out to surprise them. With a burst of excitement, the kids split up. Doug and the others ran south, while Dennis dashed north, disappearing into the brush. Moments later, the first group leaped out, shrieking with laughter. The adults chuckled, playing along, but then they noticed something. Dennis never emerged. At first, they assumed he was taking his time. His father, Bill Martin, called his name. Then his grandfather joined in. The calls became louder, more urgent. They scoured the nearby woods, expecting to find him crouched behind a tree, giggling at their concern. But there was no sign of Dennis. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, panic set in. Clyde Martin, Dennis's grandfather, set off for Cades Cove to find help, a grueling trek through the rugged terrain. Bill Martin sought assistance from a park naturalist, but nature had its own cruel timing. By nightfall, storm clouds rolled in, winds howled, thunder rumbled, and then came the rain, 3 inches in just a few hours. Trails turned to mud, washing away any trace of Dennis. With only the clothes on his back, no jacket, no hat, he was left alone in the wilderness as temperatures dropped into the 50s. By dawn, the search was in full swing. Park rangers, expert trackers, and volunteers combed the dense forests, calling his name. But the terrain was brutal. Steep slopes, thick brush, and tangled undergrowth slowed every step. Well-meaning volunteers complicated things, trampling potential evidence. Days stretched into weeks. Helicopters searched from above, dogs sniffed the ground, and thousands of man-hours were dedicated to finding the boy. But not a single clue surfaced. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing, nothing. By June 25th, Dennis's devastated family returned home. 4 days later, the official search ended. Some refused to give up, continuing on their own, but the results remained the same. Dennis had vanished, as if swallowed by the mountains. What really happened? Some believe he wandered too far and succumbed to the elements. Others think a wild animal took him. But then, there's the most chilling theory. On the day Dennis disappeared, a family miles away reported something disturbing. While hiking near Rowan's Creek, they heard a loud, terrible scream. Moments later, they saw a large, disheveled man moving through the woods, seemingly hiding from view. Could Dennis have been abducted? To this day, no one knows for sure. The Great Smoky Mountains still hold their secrets, and Dennis Martin remains one of the most haunting missing persons cases of all time. On June 12, 1972, Holmes Lake in Calabogie, Ontario, was the perfect setting for a peaceful family fishing trip. 5-year-old Adrian McNaughton, a bright-eyed boy with blonde hair, joined his father Murray, 3 siblings, and a family friend for a quiet afternoon by the water. But by nightfall, their outing would turn into one of Canada's most haunting mysteries. Adrian quickly grew bored of fishing. Frustrated, he handed his tangled fishing rod to his father. It should have been an uneventful moment, but then he was gone. No scream, no splash, no sign of distress. One second he was there, the next he had vanished. Confusion turned to panic. Murray assumed Adrian had wandered to the car and sent his eldest son, Lee, to check. But when Lee returned without him, the search began. The once peaceful lake was now a scene of chaos. Family and friends called Adrian's name, scouring the woods for any sign of him, but there was nothing. As darkness fell, fear settled in. Adrian wasn't just lost, he had disappeared. The next day, authorities launched an extensive search. The Ontario Provincial Police, OPP, thousands of volunteers, and even the Canadian Forces joined the effort. Over 150 square kilometers of rugged terrain were combed. Helicopters flew overhead, divers explored the lake, and search dogs sniffed through the dense forest. For 12 days, they searched relentlessly, yet not a single clue surfaced. No footprints, no clothing, no evidence he had been there at all. Speculation spread quickly. Some believed Adrian was taken by a wild animal. Others pointed to a suspicious black and white vehicle spotted nearby. Could he have been abducted? Theories of foul play only deepened the mystery. As the search expanded, Adrian's family clung to hope. His mother, Barbara, believed he could have been taken by someone desperate for a child. The thought of him alive, growing up elsewhere, was easier to bear than the alternative. Years passed, but Adrian's story never faded. In 2009, forensic artists created an age-enhanced image showing what he might look like in his 40s. The OPP released it, hoping someone would recognize his face. Was Adrian out there, living a life he didn't remember? In 2016, his case gained new attention through Someone Knows Something, a podcast hosted by Canadian filmmaker David Ridgen. The show re-examined evidence, explored new leads, and reignited public interest. Could modern technology finally solve the mystery? In 2018, investigators returned to Holmes Lake with new tools. A team drilled into the frozen surface, extracting sediment samples. Cadaver dogs, trained to detect human remains, signaled 2 samples, suggesting something or someone could be buried beneath. But the lake held on to its secrets. Poor visibility and thick sediment made further investigation impossible. The findings were intriguing, but not conclusive. Adrian's whereabouts remained unknown. Adrian McNaughton's disappearance is more than an unsolved case. It's a ghost story that lingers in the minds of all who hear it. His family, his community, and even strangers continue to wonder, what really happened that day? For some, he was simply lost to the wilderness. For others, the case is riddled with sinister possibilities. But one thing is certain, until answers surface, the mystery of Adrian McNaughton will continue to haunt Holmes Lake and the memories of those who remember the day he vanished.